These guys are heroes. They've been dragged through this process. The process is the punishment. I'm hoping that things resolve themselves appropriately. I think we could tell by the questioning today that it's not obvious that it was just them. And these guys need to be. They're being treated worse than pedophiles and rapists and murderers.
The Coutts Three, Marco Van Hugenbos, George Jansen, and Alex Van Herk, are being charged with mischief over $5,000 for their roles in the Coutts blockade and protest of 2022, which took place concurrently with the Freedom Convoy of the same year. The two protests were basically unified ideologically, politically, and philosophically in opposition to all of these so-called public health orders, decrees, and mandates issued by government and industry, ostensibly in pursuit of reducing transmission of COVID-19. Greg Tulloch is relevant. He's germane to this trial because as an RCMP officer with over 20 years of experience, he worked as a sort of liaison between the RCMP and the protesters in the context of the 2022 Coutts blockade and demonstration. The most noteworthy testimony that he offered during cross-examination from the defense teams was that there was a decentralized nature to the protest. Now, remember, one of the core claims of the prosecution is that the three defendants constituted the leadership of the protest and therefore had a degree of control and influence and direction over the protesters. So Tulloch testified that the protest was actually composed of differing factions with different points of view and strong disagreements about how to proceed with the protest and if or how to end it in terms of their negotiations or dialogue with the RCMP. Tulloch also accepted several premises put forward to him by Michael Johnston, the defense attorney for Alex Van Herk. He accepted the premise that the Coutts demonstration was, quote, a political protest, and that it was a, quote, non-violent petition as a redress of grievances for the protesters. The Crown's previous witness, also an RCMP officer with over 20 years of experience, a man by the name of Mark Wilgosh, in previous days also testified to something that Greg Tulloch reiterated today, and that is that Marco Van Hugenbos and George Jansen provided a sort of utility to the RCMP in terms of the RCMP's goals of maintaining peaceable assembly, having a sort of point of contact with which to liaise with the protesters, and perhaps most importantly, people that they could utilize towards inducing openings of the intermittent blockages of Alberta 4 highway. This is the highway that the defendants are accused of having driven a blockade of. And there were times when traffic could not proceed in either direction along this highway, which meets at the U.S.-Canada border at the Coutts-Sweetwater intersection. So again, just to reiterate that point, both Marco Van Hugenbos and George Jansen were credited by these two RCMP officers who were both invited as Crown witnesses as being useful, as providing utility to the RCMP. I'm here with Rob Anders, former MP. I'm also here with Archer Pulowski, no stranger to the Rebel News audience. You folks are obviously in the courtroom during the proceedings for the Coutts trio, the Coutts Three, and maybe folks can tell us why you're here today. Let's open up with that. Rob, why are you here today?
These guys are heroes. They've been dragged through this process. The process is the punishment. I'm hoping that things resolve themselves appropriately. I think we could tell by the questioning today that it's not obvious that it was just them. And these guys need to be. They're being treated worse than pedophiles and rapists and murderers.
And now, Archer, what about you? What do you think about what's going on? And also, why are you here today?
Well, I'm here to stand in solidarity with our Canadian heroes. Like I said, hundreds of times, the truck convoy, everything that we have seen during that time, it was the best thing I have ever seen on this side, on this soil. It was beautiful. It was amazing. It was Canadians coming together. That's what Canada was supposed to be all about. So just to witness this today, my heart was broken that they are subjecting those people through the proceedings, the lawfare, the attack on our liberties that continues to this day. It's just shocking to me. As I was listening to the Crown and to the lawyers and the testimonies, it reminded me, of course, of my childhood. I've seen those trials before. We call them the show trials, that the government would select different individuals and turn them into scapegoats to scare others. That's what we're observing right now. Those are scapegoats. The government tries to send a message to the rest of us. So I'm here to support them. I'm here to stand in solidarity with what is happening to them, because they stood for the rest of us when we needed them the most. Well, put it this way, when we needed our politicians the most in the history of this nation, they were nowhere to be found, but they came forth and represented the rest of us.
Okay, a follow-up question for you on the note of tragedy and how it's heartbreaking for you to observe this political persecution, this show trial, as you put it. Can you share any silver linings? Is there any bright side that you're observing or partaking in while you're here?
Well, I'm definitely shocked that my name is popping up all the time. Every hour it's this pastor, this sermon, this and that. I am absolutely shocked that today's testimony of a police officer, RCMP police officer, actually proves what we have been alleging from the very beginning, that it was not what I said. It was just I was there. And he testified to that fact today. It was not my speech, which, as you remember, later on was used as a weapon against me. So I see good things happening out of this trial. I see that the Crown does not have a strong case at all. I see that now his or theirs, their own witnesses are contradicting to what the Crown prosecutor wanted the jury to see, because you've got witness after witness after witness saying, hey, there were a bunch of people that claim to be leaders, and yet we learn about different names, different individuals, as they call it, different players through this whole freedom movement, if you will, and yet the three were chosen to be attacked, which doesn't make any sense, because the testimony of the officers themselves is that, our paraphrase, if it was not for them, there would be a real problem. They were actually helpful to the government. They were helpful to the police. They were working with the police, and they were not blocking anything. They were actually responsible for opening the lines, which is completely a different story. Alex and Marco and George are being subjected to the same person. It feels like it's personal. It's a personal vendetta by a very vindictive, evil individual that is looking at this case from a very personal point of view. I will get them no matter how much I'm going to lie, no matter how much I'm going to make stuff up, but I will get my way.
So one quick note for the audience based on something that Archer was saying about the utility of the defendants. Two of the defendants, Marco van Hugenbos and George Jansen, were both described by both RCMP officers who were Crown witnesses as useful towards maintaining peaceable assembly and also towards furthering certain ends that the cops had with respect to opening up certain lanes. Now, Rob, I've got a question for you on two notes. Number one, you were also remarking on some things you observed during proceedings about this sort of decentralized nature, if I can paraphrase, of the protest, as opposed to a central claim from the prosecution that it was sort of centrally directed by the leadership composed of the Coutts Three. Maybe you can remark on that. And more importantly, on the political side, you've got a political pedigree. Where are the politicians? Should they be here? And are you expecting any to either arrive or even make statements regarding this trial and what it relates to more broadly?
Sure. Okay, so on the decentralization side, obviously the Crown picked these three guys, and I think what was happening today is the defense is saying, well, hold on, your notes say that there was a whole bunch of people, that there were votes, that Art's speech changed the nature of what they were doing in terms of Edmonton or staying in Coutts, and so no, it was decentralized. I mean, his own notes admit that. So it's like, why did you pick these three guys? I think in Marco's case, it's because he was an elected two-time councillor, and they're picking on a guy who was giving it political credibility, and they're making an example of him, and they're dragging him through this in order to dissuade other people from taking on the cause. In terms of your comment or question about other politicians, I have been saddened tremendously over the last few years that there have not been more elected officials. I was there for 18 and a half years in Ottawa, but there were not more currently elected officials that were active in this, that were standing against the budget that Trudeau wanted, or the Emergency Measures Act, or the stuff that was happening with regard to Kenny in the lockdowns here. I mean, it's tragic. I mean, there was one MLA that I can remember that came to the Coutts stuff, and Mr. Hunter, and I've known him since university, but there was nobody else. It was sad.
But now the question is, where are our politicians right now? I mean, we're talking about elected representatives that's supposed to serve us. I mean, you don't have to like us. This is not a popularity contest, but where is our representation, right? Well, I mean, where is Danielle Smith? I mean, she won the leadership, and she is an MLA and now premier of our beloved Alberta, based on the sentiment that she's going to come to the rescue, that she's going to be different than Kenny. I call her Kenny 2.0. Because her own record, forget about what Kenny did. What Kenny did was unbelievable, was crazy, was Nazi style, Soviet style. But she's continuing the sentiments. I mean, we have political prisoners. We got people hunted down to this day under her leadership. She promised those three men in many number of private and public meetings that she is going to bring the amnesty bill, that this whole craziness will end, and of course it's not happening. So my question is, who is representing us? It looks like we have no one that wants to represent us, because we are on the side of freedom.
Folks, we're running two fundraising campaigns related to this trial. The first is to fund the legal costs of the defendants. Lawyers are not cheap, and they don't work for free. You can donate to the Legal Defense Fund by going to Coutts3.com. Remember, if you make a donation, you'll be issued a charitable receipt, because this fundraiser is being administered by our partner organization, the Democracy Fund, a nonprofit outfit that's committed to protecting your Canadian constitutional rights and freedoms. Secondarily, you've got a fundraiser for our operational costs at Rebel News towards producing this in the field and original journalism and reporting. Namely, that's to get me out here from Ottawa. Airfare, rental car, accommodation, it's not free, costs money. So if you folks value what we're doing here, please donate at truckertrials.com and stay up to date with our ongoing coverage.